Good morning, darlings. Okay, so today we are going to take a first look at English Language Paper 1 in preparation for GCSE. We are going to look at what the paper entails first, and then we're going to do a few exercises, tasks that we've done in class so far. And this video is mainly for those people who, for whatever reason, can't be in school at the moment. So this is what we're doing. Okay, so we're just going to quickly run through what's on the screen. So just a reminder then, first of all, that I use icons in my lessons. This here is sentence starter Steve, and we all know him for when we're really stuck. He's in purple and white usually because a teaching assistant writes in purple, and they usually help you with stuff like this. Helpful Harvey, you all know him. I use him quite often, and yeah, he's fabulous. We love Helpful Harvey. He's great. What else we've got? We've got keep calm and write your essay for when you know that it is a reminder to write in the third person formal language. This is a quick quiz. You'll know that you'll need to remember stuff. This is new information is coming up. So it'll be different colours depending on what skill you're building with the information, which we'll come to in a minute when we talk about metacognition. This is cultural capital. This is when extra information is to be discovered, and you're usually about something to do with our country or something to do with the culture in which a text is set. Stuff like that. But you've seen these before. World of work, you know this. We've got a massive careers. What's the word I'm looking for? We've got a focus in this school. And so we oftentimes, when we're studying any subject, we can't really understand how this particular task or activity is going to help us. So for some of these more challenging, more obscure tasks that you perhaps think, well, how is this going to help me? We'll see a world of work and we can explore that. This is your stretch and challenge. You'll know when to have a look for this. And when you want the challenge, when you want to aim high, when you want to build and develop your skills. This one is a given, and I won't patronise you by reading out what's on the screen, but it is important, so you might want to go ahead and pause and have a quick look at that. But homework is important whether you like it or not. Sorry, darlings, but it is. Okay, so when I was talking about which skills you were developing, all of these things up here are to do with our metacognition. You'll see these in every single lesson all around the school. You should be accustomed to these by now. So I won't patronise you and read the text. You can read it yourself. But you know what these are for, and you know how it helps you to approach your task and develop your skills for analytical stuff and deciphering and decoding and answering. This is what we're doing. Okay, my ugly mug here, you'll see when I recommend a book that is to do with what we are talking about. So you'll see this at various points throughout all the modules, but even in this one as well. And I usually put whatever stars I gave it on Goodreads in the recommendation as well, so you know how good it is, in my humble opinion. I am just one reader, of course. And then this one is obvious. It's a film. We're watching a film. Not all the time, but just in case there's a clip or something, apart from one little video clip, which I shall link below in the description box, which I didn't use this, but I don't know why. Okay, so independent work is obvious. You really do need to work on your own for this on account of the fact that you can't ask anybody else for help in the exam. And this is a reminder to take notes and why taking notes is important. There are other ones, but you'll see them as we go through. So, English language, paper 1, for AQA, explorations in creative reading and writing. So, we have done all these activities on this video in class so far. So, we're going to run through what everybody else came up with. So, it's 1 hour and 45 minutes, and there is a source A, which you need to read through, so you will get an extract that you have to read and answer questions on. You will be aiming to analyse an extract of modern text or 19th century or something. It's usually 19th century. Anyway, you'll need 15 minutes to read and 45 minutes to answer the questions, and we'll break down those timings as we go through. And then for the part B, section B, you'll be aiming to produce a piece of creative writing. So either it's usually write a description based on the image or write a story about whatever it is. Sometimes it's write a story based on this image. It's whatever's on the text, but you can pick from one of two tasks for that. So I do not ever want to see these sentences in red here. I don't want to see them. I don't want to see the S word either. Anybody in my class knows that we don't use the S word. It doesn't demonstrate breadth, depth, sophistication, or a wide variety of the English language, which we need for everyday life, not only our GCSEs. I don't want to see, oh, and this shows, and this shows, and this shows. No, absolutely not. Now, there is a critical or active verbs to use in petal writing board at the back of my classroom. I'm sure you've all seen it, but we've got words on there such as criticises, reflects, manifests, suggests, highlights, portrays, conveys, explores, explains, constructs, connotes, confirms, supports. Those words implies, depicts, indicates, argues, denotes. We've got loads of words that you should be using instead of this S word here. These sentences down here, these sentence starters, these green ones, are a great way to start your writing if you're not sure. When you get to be in the flow of stuff and you are totally confident or more confident in your writing, you may branch out away from these. You might not need them at all, but if you are struggling, this is a good place to start. So you can screenshot this, I don't mind at all. It's the same as at the board in the back corner of my classroom, so feel free. I don't mind you screenshotting this for future use at all. Okay, so what do you need to do then? We need to find, I hope you didn't pause that. We need to draw a chart and determine what sort of sentences each type contains. So simple, compound, compound, complex, simple, compound, complex, and compound, complex, what they contain, and an example for each. Now, the idea is that you do this chart and give it a go. I know that I've just had the answers up there, so hopefully you won't have paid any attention to that. So go ahead and pause it and try and do it first, and then come back for the answers. Don't cheat, don't go back, and don't skip forward either. Okay, I'm going to assume that you've been honest and tried it yourself. So these are the answers then. So simple sentence is one independent clause, a clause all by its very self. I like grammar. Compound sentence is one independent clause plus one or more dependent clauses. I like grammar because I find language interesting. So I find language interesting would be a sentence on its own, but if we are going to link it to grammar, we need the because. There's the dependent clause here. Complex sentences, one independent clause or one or more dependent clauses. So these ones depend on the first one that don't make sense. So compound sentences, these two sentences could make sense on their own, but a dependent clause requires the main sentence to make sense. So because I like grammar would not be a sentence that made sense all by itself. So because I like grammar, I have spent a lot of time studying sentence structure. So I have spent a lot of time studying sentence structure would be a sentence all by itself, a statement. But because I like grammar is not a statement by itself. So we have to, that's the dependent clause. Compound complex, two independent clauses, two sentences that make sense all by themselves, and one or more dependent clause. So here, I have never been a great student. That would make sense all by itself, that sentence. So that's an independent sentence. But because I like grammar, that's a dependent clause because it doesn't make sense on its own. I have spent a lot of time studying sentence structure. That again, there is a sentence that would make sense all by itself. So two independent clauses, one or more dependent clause. So if you didn't get those, you can write them down, draw yourself a chart, fill your chart in, and use these for revision. These are the sorts of things, you won't be asked to define them, but you might want to start thinking about how to incorporate the effect of them into your analytical writing. And Mr. Brough, who is another teacher on YouTube, does a great version of this for English Language Paper 1, where he looks at Frankenstein and the weather and how the dependent clauses help enhance the effect of the pathetic fallacy, and it's great. And I might link that in the description box down below actually, just so that you can check that one out as well. So let's have a look then. So we looked at how many words it would take to create a whole, complete story full of emotion. And people were saying in the classroom, they were saying, oh, 5,000, miss, you need 5,000 for a good rounded story. No, you can have 1,000, you can have 1,000, you can have 10,000, miss. It needs 10,000 for a full story of emotion. And then we looked at this. So Ernest Hemingway, so I'm going to click this here and it will open up a document. It won't, it will open up a list of his books, actually, because the document's at the bottom. I'm lying. By the end of this term, you need to have read at least one of the following books. So The Old Man and the Sea, To Have and to Have Not, For Whom the Bell Tolls, or The Complete Short Stories. I have read this one. It's fantastic. The Old Man and the Sea. It's a brilliant book, but read one of these. It's really good for you. Really good for you. And then let's have a look at, oh no, the document doesn't open on this one. It must be the next one. I was lying. So we looked at for sale, which could indicate a lack of money or poverty, or that somebody's made a loss because they would have bought these new shoes, but they won't be able to sell them for the same price. And we're talking about how actually they're selling them, but they won't get their money back, which might be quite sad. Baby shoes, we're talking about a loss. Perhaps this was a loss in terms of potential of the child, or maybe a miscarriage. And then we said never worn. Maybe, just maybe, this poor baby has died. Maybe, on a positive note, the baby's grown up and grew too fast, or was born too big and couldn't fit into the shoes. But more likely, it was a sad story. So these are the sorts of things we need to look at. And if we count how many notes we've made a lot more notes than there are words in this story, which is generally what we need to do for analytical writing. So if you want to go ahead and make some notes about that, you're more than welcome to pause the video and do so. Okay, let's move on. So what's the point then? We will be asked to not only analyse the effects of keywords and sentences from a short extract, we'll also be asked to create the opening of a story or a short story in only 45 minutes. So if we can understand how to be a literary archaeologist, which is something I mentioned on the Christmas Carol videos, where we are then going to be able to apply the work and the ideas and the techniques that other people use into our own writing. And when we look at the connotations of words on a page, we realise that actually being able to develop that skill will be useful for every career. When handing over writing notes or briefings, or handing over, like if you're a nurse, for example, where I used to be a nurse, handovers, a complex vocabulary will help convey vital, detailed information in a short space of time. So it's both important that we understand all these words and we're able to use them accurately. So nursing care, anything office-based, the police, the fire, anything that requires a handover for shift work. It could be on a building site. It could be any of these things are really, really useful to be able to build up a sophisticated vocabulary. So in the next few slides, we'll be looking at some 50-word stories. Now, I'm not going to patronise you and read them out. You can pause the video and do that. After every sentence, Helpful Harvey says, you should think, what does that mean? What does that tell me? And then we can then add them all up. So English is sort of a science, really. This metaphor plus this simile plus this adverb plus this adjective equals this effect. Essentially, it's a science, an art, but it is also a science. So we need to think about what we've learned about the whole picture. We need to think about individual sentences, and then we need to think about how those all create the individual picture, the bigger picture. So let's get rid of sentence starter Steve for a while. So we're looking for all the methods. The teacher hint here is that we're looking for all the methods we've been able to identify and analyse. So here we've got a question at the top. So we're going to analyse. How does the writer use language to describe the enemy city? Now, we know that a how question equals methods. This means your metaphors, your similes, your sibilants, your adjectives, your verbs, but also your different sentence types that we've just had a look at. So he sighed, and we said that the word sighed there, the verb, might indicate either stress or exhaustion. At the fiery, so this adjective just depicts danger. Shells are usually empty. If you think of an egg, it's an egg until you break it and take the middle out of it. Then it's an egg shell. It's no longer an egg because the inside, its contents aren't there. So that's what we looked at, okay? So thick black smoke, we've got this k, k, k sound, and that is a consonant, and it's what's called consonance because it's a repeated consonant sound. Thick black smoke, it's a k, k sound. Billowed, and we've also got black and billowed here. This is plosive because it's plosive here for this sort of alliteration, even though it's not necessarily next to one another. Thick black smoke, billowed is the where you put the emphasis. It's the plosive. Charred bodies, so we talked about how this is quite horrific in terms of its imagery. Charred meaning having been burned to death or burned. So perhaps they died before they were burned, but in the worst case scenario, if this writer wanted to increase the harrowing image, they're scattered along the streets as though they'd been running, perhaps. And we talked about the scant sunbeams pierce the ashen haze. We talked about this might sound like bullets going through the air. We also talked about scant sunbeams. If something is scant, if somebody is scantily clad, it means they're not wearing much. Scant sunbeams, meaning there isn't a lot of light because of all the black smoke that's billowing. He huffed. So again, this verb can link to stress or exhaustion. The ashen haze. We said maybe pierce the ashen haze. We said maybe personification, maybe it's a bit of a stretch. And then we looked at all the rest of it. Now, sentence starter Steve says, there are two ways that we might approach this. By using the metaphor, blank, whatever it is, the writer creates a sense of whatever it is. Or you could say, because the writer has used sibilants and then put the quote in, the reader is able to picture and then go on to say what it is. Okay, so those are two ways that you might want to address this task. So pause the video and do this task and then come back. Write a little paragraph. Hope you've done that. Okay, so I'm going to assume that you've paused the video, written a little paragraph or a couple of sentences about it to be analytical, and then you've come back. Well done. So we debated in the class what was good about this piece of writing. My throat hurt. I couldn't breathe. I bit my lips to stop myself making sound. I could hear my pulse in my ears. I was wondering if the next sound I heard would be bad or good. I held the rail in front of me. It was warm where my hands were. I was angry. Tears were on my forearms as they'd fallen off my face. I couldn't breathe properly. There was a funny smell. I was tense. I listened for the verdict to be given. I hoped it would be not guilty. Now, a lot of people didn't say there was much good about this. They said, okay, fallen off my face is a bit of alliteration maybe. And they said, okay, yeah, it's all right. But there's far too many I's, far too many short sentences, and it doesn't flow. In fact, the class slated this, and quite rightly too, because it isn't great writing. And I know that because I wrote it, and I wrote it purposely bad, honest, I really did. Because we need to think about what's better about this piece of writing. We need to understand what makes this piece of writing better than the one before, and to be able to justify our reasoning. So let's have a quick look at this. The lump in the back of my throat threatened to block the air moving to my burning lungs. My lips were clamped. No, I can't speak. My lips were clamped tightly between my teeth to stop any sound escaping. The sound of my heart beat like a drum in my ears, impending doom a distinct possibility if the next sound they heard was the wrong one for my liking. My hands gripped the cold steel of the rail in front of me, sweating, heating up the metal beneath with the rage that poured from me. My forearms were warmed by the attack of heavy drops of salty water falling from my face. My breath refused to move normally, hitched as it was, in tiny samples of the musty oxygen that reached my nostrils. Each muscle in my body tensed in anticipation. My ears strained to hear the verdict being returned. And that's supposed to say verdict because I can't spell. Verdict being returned. My soul prayed for the words, not guilty. Now, essentially in these two extracts, the same thing has happened. But what you need to do is pause the video and say exactly why this one is better. What have I done in this piece of writing to make it better than this piece of writing? The same thing happens, but why is this rubbish and why is this so much better? So here you're going to need to look at your methods, you need to look at your personification, you need to look at metaphors, sibilance, alliteration, you need to look at plosive verbs or plosive sounds, you need to look at any similes perhaps, you need to look at sentence type and length, you need to look at all those things to justify, to understand why this piece is better than the previous one. So please go ahead and pause the video and do that now and then come back. You're probably looking at about three paragraphs or something like that. Okay, I'm going to assume that you've paused the video and given that a good shot and you've got some good ideas and you've got lots and lots and lots of things to talk about. So well done. Okay, right, this is a little starter that's all about how one sentence can be interpreted differently by numerous people. Now, you might have seen this floating around on the internet because this is where I stole it from. Stole, it's on the slide. Okay, I didn't mean that pun. I didn't pun. No, reference. I didn't mean that reference, but it's there anyway. Okay, starter 5. I never said she stole my money. This sentence has 7 different meanings depending on the stressed word. So in your books, you need to take a second and pause this and then describe which sentence, where the stressed word, which stressed word changes the sentence to mean something else. So I never said she stole my money. 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 And I never said she stole my money. How do those sentences vary depending on where on earth you put the emphasis? Well, okay, so go ahead and try that. And I'll give you the answers when you come back. Okay, I assume that you did that, so well done. So, I never said she stole my money. Someone else said it. I never said she stole my money. I didn't ever say it. I never said she stole my money. I might have implied it, but I didn't say it. I never said she stole my money. I said someone took the money. I never said she stole my money. She may have borrowed it. I never said she stole my money. It was somebody else's money. And I never said she stole my money. She didn't steal money, meaning she could steal something else. So what you need to be aware of, and this is more about when you are writing your piece, your work, rather than your interpretation, I think. I mean, it is the interpretation as well, but this is why English is so good, because every perspective is valid within certain reason, as long as you can justify it. So, but it's more about how your work could be interpreted by other people. So you need to be careful about how you use your sentences. So this is very good referencing and keep in mind for section B. Okay, so question 2 of language paper 1 asks us to analyse about 6 or 10 lines of the bigger extract. It's a shorter sample that we're given and it's on the top of the question paper. 9 minutes is about the time that we should spend answering this question, because otherwise we'll run out of time for the higher marked question at the end, question 4. So you need to be able to identify all the different things that we've been talking about: descriptive writing, verb choices, spams, so your similes, personification or pathetic fallacy, alliteration, metaphors, and sibilance, sentence structure, and the effect of particular word choices, which sort of comes under these, but the effect is fine. If you just say, oh, the writer has used a metaphor here, your examiner will be like, yeah, and what's your point? If you can say the writer has used a metaphor to encapsulate this particular idea, then that will get you the recognition that you deserve as an English student and will achieve you some marks. You will be able to demonstrate your worth as an English student. So, understanding the choice of word, the impact of word choices. This is the video where I didn't use the film icon, and I will link this down below. So check the description bar for this. So saying what you mean and meaning what you say can be two very, very different things. When writers write, sometimes what they say and what they want you to figure out can also be very different things. And the most famous example, again, I've stolen this from the internet, is this: what the author meant, what your English teacher thinks you mean, and the bit in the middle. For instance, the curtains were blue. What your teacher thinks, the curtains will represent his immense depression and lack of will to carry on. What the author meant, the curtains were blue. So somewhere in between that is probably the truth. So what we need to do, you should check out that video first. We looked at the impression that the writer created of Brighton for working class Londoners and how this is achieved. So there are notes on the screen which I'm not going to go through because there are rather a lot of them, so you can pause and have a look. The sheet for this is in the shared area, and I will make sure that that is up as when this video is posted, for when this video is posted. So we looked at the idea of plural nouns. It's not just one person. We looked at the fact that Victoria every 5 minutes means that it's a popular place. The idea of them standing on the tops of the little local trains means there's no seats. We talked about the sibilance of the S here, minutes, Queen's Road, standing on the tops of the little local trains, stepped off. The S sound might be the wind going past them. We talked about the fact that it might be the sound of a steam train, maybe. We talked about the adjectives and the comparison, fresh and glittering air, and it immediately makes us think of the comparison to the polluted London air with all the smog going on. And we had a look at some of these other things as well, which you can have a look at and make notes on. Okay, let's move on. So this is also a chart that you need to make just before we get on to really and truly analysing this in a big paragraph. I'd like to make sure that we're breaking it down first. So quote, little local trains, alliteration, little and local, makes it seem friendly and different than London. Fresh and glittering air, then we need to find the method, and then we need to state the effect. I would like you to do at least 4 rows for this. So columns go down, rows go across. So you need these 2, and you can take the first one, that's fine. You need to complete 3 more, please. So pause the video and go ahead and do that now, and then come back. Okay, well done. I'm going to assume that you've done that to the very best of your ability and filled in a fabulous chart. Well done. Okay, the visiting Londoners at the time this novel was written in 1938 would be used to cramped terraced houses, narrow streets, and air pollution. So you need to discuss, and you might want to make notes about this if you're watching this video at home. We discussed this in class, but you might want to have a look and just make some notes in your book or on a piece of paper if you've not got your book with you about how the details on language used might describe the visitors, suggest why they might be bewildered. And if you don't know what bewildered means, you need to look it up when visiting Brighton, but also how it might appeal to them and how green the writer hints at the weather. So go ahead and make sure that you've done that now. Make some notes to answer that question and demonstrate your understanding of the text. Okay, I'm going to assume that you've done that. Well done. Now what you need to do is think about the mood that the author's word choices create and how this is achieved. So you need to write analysis of any 3 of the following, commenting on what mood they create. So you don't have to do them all. You can just pick any 3 of these that you think, oh, I can answer that question. I can answer that question. So let's see what Helpful Harvey says. He says, for the higher marks, you'll want to analyse the quotes which have more than one connotation and more than one method. I'm sure that you've seen my analysis triangle before, but just in case, I'll describe it to you. So if you spend a lot of time on the quote and hardly any time on your analysis, meaning your triangle is top heavy, you will gain fewer marks and have a lower grade. If you spend a little bit of time on the quote but a lot of time on analysis, then your triangle will be bottom heavy, and that's where the higher marks will be achieved. Okay, so let's put Helpful Harvey away and let's see what the world of work has to say. So understanding what common connotations certain words have is a vital part of communication, necessary for every job in the world, even a lighthouse keeper. That's a very solitary job. You still have to communicate. Developing this skill now will help you in your future careers or jobs, no matter what they might be. You might be a farmer, you might be a policeman, you might be a doctor. It's especially important if you're a doctor, especially if you're a surgeon, for example. You might be a teacher, you might be an architect, you might be a sewage treatment plant worker, you could be a vet. Any job in the entire world will require communication. So it's important that we understand what connotations words can have. So pause this and do this now, and then come back. Well done. I'm going to assume that you did that really, really well. Well done. Okay, so we have some tasks here for you. Well, I say we, I mean me. I have some tasks here for you. Okay, the alliteration of the scintillating S sound and repetition of the P sound in silver paint sparkled on the piers. I mean, you could even say that is sibilant rather than alliteration. Add to the lively, positive mood of this description. So number one, I need you to write a new version of this sentence without the alliteration, which is much more challenging than you think. My pupils here in our class struggled. And then I need you to analyse, evaluate which version is better and why. And for a stretch and challenge, for those people who want to take this to the next level and challenge themselves and develop these skills, I need you to explain the effect of the alliteration in the following sentences. He was wise but wizened. Her makeup was natural and neutral. The body was thrown into a deep, dark chasm. So go ahead and pause the video and do that now, and then come back. Well done, darlings. I'm going to assume that you've done that. So, what we needed to do, we needed to have a look at poetry. And what we're going to do is this document here, The Wasteland, is going to be in the shared area that you can then complete. This is T.S. Eliot, this guy here. And he wrote this here, this Unreal City. We're going to have a look at this stanza. So this is also available for you to print off, save you copying out so you can make notes. And the task is to read through the stanza or the extract and underline any words you don't understand and look them up first of all, because you obviously need to build that vocabulary. Which side is the wasteland? That's the wasteland. Is this something else, or is that the wasteland too? No, it's the cultural capital button I need. So why is it important to learn about other writers than those we studied just for GCSE? In this country, we are blessed with having some of the greatest poets and writers and authors and playwrights in the world ever. Broadening our knowledge to incorporate some of their works gives us a much deeper understanding and enjoyment of literature and English as a subject. Also, it helps us understand its significance in our culture and how modern day plays, films, books, music have been influenced by those that went before. And T.S. Eliot is the original influencer. He is one of the originals. He is one of the originals, and he is not to be underrated at all in the slightest. We have in Westminster Abbey, down in London, what's called Poets' Corner, where the greatest playwrights and poets and writers of our time and of our history are buried. Shakespeare is there, Dickens is there. We have a rich cultural heritage in this country, and we should make all the effort to appreciate it. So go ahead and do this task now. If you know all the words, that's brilliant. If you don't know where these places are, you can have a look on Google Maps. Go ahead and do that now and then come back. Okay, so we use then clips to start to analyze unseen poetry. We use clips. So content, what is it about? When was it written? And how and why? So this is really content and context. We don't need the context bit in our exam for English Literature Paper 2, but it's good to build up that knowledge anyway and just have it in the back of our minds. So how and why might the time it's been written in have influenced the poet? This is also good for your AQA anthology poetry as well. Language, we need to look at how does the writer want the reader to respond? Is the poem happy, sad, or bitter? And does the tone of the poem change? If so, why? Is there any repetition or alliteration used? What about oxymorons or juxtaposition? What about onomatopoeia in poetry? Where is it? and how are they used and what effect does it create? Imagery. Does the writer use any similes or a metaphor to paint a particular picture? What effect do they have? Are they a recurring theme or a motif, perhaps? Your personal response, how does the writer want the reader to feel or think? What's the reader supposed to understand after having read the poem? What is the point of writing the poem? What message is the writer trying to convey? Poetry is the original form of rebellion. Poetry is an art form, and we all know this. But poetry, when censorship was around and people weren't allowed to criticise and weren't allowed to come out right and say something that they wanted to say, they wrote poems because within the connotations, buried within the text, are these messages that poets wanted other people to realise and think about, and so poetry we use it in music today. We have songs that challenge things directly. Stormzy does it in the 70s and 80s. Bruce Springsteen did it with Born in the USA. That was a criticism about one of the wars that the USA went to. Music is poetry to sound, to a melody, and it's a form of rebellion. Now, the World of Work thing says, by analysing the poem, which is the skill we're using here, we are building our decoding skills. This means that we can look at something and understand how it's built and what it's for. It's useful for loads of different careers. And by working independently, we're building vital skills to be able to rely on ourselves and think for ourselves. It's essential for life, not just for work. So go ahead and do that task, and you'll use the clips sheet that looks like this, which is also in the shared area. I will do the rest of these lessons on the next video, and I will upload this now because it is 36 minutes long. And so come back for part 2 of this video. I sound like I'm on TikTok. Come back for part 2. And be sure to check the link for the video in the description box. Okay, take care, darlings, and I will see you soon. Bye. Like and subscribe. Jokes.